With the first round of the NFL draft now behind us, it is time to do what we all love to do the day after a draft and overreact completely to players we have never seen play on the field. So today I'm going to give you my top 5 takeaways from the first round of the NFL draft. Seattle. I need to start by eating a little bit of crow. I'm on record as saying that the Seahawks sometimes try to be a little too clever for their own good. The Seahawks were actually quite clever in this year's draft, and I thought had a very quality first round. They didn't immediately address major concerns, instead focusing on doubling down on their strengths. Given that the Hawks last year were already a decent team, this actually makes sense, allowing them to be better in the things that they did well. And the fact that their division is so weak, with the Cardinals and Rams both being bottom feeders this year, they can buy some time before needing to shore up some of their most pressing needs. Additionally, they have 2 picks in the second round, one at 37 and at 52. If they can snag Ohio State offensive tackle DeJuan Jones at 37, they will walk away from this draft with 3 first-round caliber talents. Taking Devon Witherspoon at 5 was a little bit of a surprise. I thought they were going to be addressing the defensive line. However, they did get a wonderful young cornerback to pair next to Tariq Woolen, and I think Seattle is going to have a very strong secondary sooner rather than later. The fact that they added Jackson Smith-Njigba afterwards as a third receiver to complement DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, another excellent core, which makes its receivers downright scary and gives them a punching chance in any game this year. Without question, Seattle came out of the first round a better team than it went in. Let's talk about the Lions. They had such a great offseason in which they addressed some real glaring needs with striking, unlion-like precision. So much so that I even made a video about it. And how do they thank me? By making an absolute fuckerclust of the first round. Look, they entered the night with last year's top 5 offense, most of its key players returning, a retooled defense that was a cornerback and an edge rusher away from being potentially dominant, and the 6th and the 18th picks in this year's draft. Those 2 picks turned into a running back and linebacker that were widely projected to go early in the second round. And yes, they still do have a 34th pick yet to come. However, we can only grade what they've done so far in the first round. Now, this is nothing against Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell. I think both of them are high-quality prospects that are at the top or near the top for their positions at this draft. I think they're going to be great players, and I do not fault Detroit for liking them. In fact, I think Detroit makes sense to go get them. It just doesn't make sense to get them at the picks that they took them. Detroit had the number 6 pick, and Tyree Wilson fell to them, the defensive end out of Texas Tech, who was projected to be a top 5 pick. This would have been a great pickup, and it gave them a stud to bolster that edge rush. Instead, the Lions traded back and got the 12th and 34th picks. Okay, so now the Lions are sitting there with 12, 18, and 34 as their picks. It's a shame they didn't go Tyree Wilson, but still a lot of assets, a lot of good players still to get in the first round. But then at 12, that's where things really took a turn. The Lions took Jahmyr Gibbs when Christian Gonzalez, as well as some other great cornerbacks and defensive ends, were still on the board. Look, Jahmyr Gibbs is a great prospect, and regardless of how good he is and how loaded he makes that Lions running back committee, if you had Gibbs going in the first round, let alone in the top 20, if they really loved Gibbs and they really had to get him, they could have gotten him at 18, which would already have been considered a reach. The fact that they were able to acquire the 34th pick as well means that they could have gotten Campbell with that pick. Campbell wasn't projected to go in some mock drafts as late as 50. What kills me about the Lions draft isn't the prospect themselves. Again, I like both prospects. I think it's great that the Lions took those guys. I don't think it's great that the Lions took those guys at the picks where they took them. They could have drafted a guy like Christian Gonzalez and then still have gotten Gibbs and Campbell. And that to me just seems like poor resource management and a missed opportunity to really put themselves ahead of the pack, get it, in the NFC North by shoring up a few key needs, by taking that 1 or 2 defensive stud that they really needed to bolster their defense in those critical defensive line and defensive secondary positions. Let's talk about the Eagles. They just had a Super Bowl run and then lost one of their key anchors in the defensive line in Javon Hargrave to rival San Francisco 49ers in the offseason. And they go into this draft and absolutely just reload on talent. I mean, wow, talk about hitting it out of the park. The Eagles started this draft with the 10th and 30th pick, and they got two quality prospects, including one top three talent. No one can question Jalen Carter's ability. And hopefully he matures as a pro and keep himself on the field where he's going to be a nightmare for opposing O-lines. And getting Nolan Smith to pair with him on the edge, that just seems almost unfair. The Eagles entered the draft with serious needs at defensive line, and they left the first round with not one but two excellent talents on the line. Absolutely great drafting. This to me is a much better example of resource management, and I think the Eagles did much more with their picks, even though they were drafting from worse positions than the Lions did. There's no Super Bowl hangover in Philly. The Eagles have absolutely restocked and reloaded for another title run. The only question is, should they be renamed the Philadelphia Bulldogs? Houston Texans did such a great job of deceiving everyone, especially Will Levis, about what they were going to do with that pick. They ended up going with CJ Stroud, which somehow seems like a surprise, even though at the very beginning of the draft, at the very beginning when the mock boards are first being released, everyone had CJ Stroud going to the Texans. So a masterful job by the Texans in throwing everyone off and really keeping everyone guessing. Afterwards, they then traded up from 12 to 3 and were able to get Will Anderson Jr., who is viewed as a can't-miss defensive end from Alabama. They had to pay a king's ransom to make that move. However, there is no question in my mind that that was the right thing to do. They got a top-end talent to pair alongside a top-end quarterback prospect. You combine that with all the other things that the Texans did over this offseason, and the Texans are going to be next year's most improved team. And finally, I got to give Bills Mafia a little bit of love. I know I'm being a homer here, but how can I talk about my top takeaways and not talk about my favorite team? Look, the Bills took a page out of Seattle's playbook in this one and doubled down on an area of relative strength. Dawson Knox may not be an elite tier for his position, but he is well above average. Most teams would love having a tight end of Dawson Knox's caliber on their team. Drafting Utah tight end Dalton Kincaid, therefore, was a bit of surprise. The Bills do have some needs on their roster, though it's unclear what a late first-round pick could have done to solve those needs. I actually think this move makes a ton of sense, as Dalton Kincaid is probably, as far as offensive impact goes, one of the most talented guys still available at that point in the draft. The Bills did have to move up 2 spots to get him, as they traded up to the 25th so they could flip over to the Cowboys. GM Brandon Beane revealed later on the Pat McAfee show that they were very confident Dallas had targeted Dalton Kincaid and they wanted to make sure they were able to get him. Now, they're pairing Dalton Kincaid, who is a true wide receiving threat in a tight end body, next to Dawson Knox. And that's going to form a very scary tight end duo for Josh Allen, especially in the red zone where he really struggled during stretches of last year. It also gives AFC teams a brand new wrinkle to have to defend in a loaded Bills offense that can now roll out a terrifying 2 tight end set. And make no mistake about it, Bills Mafia, as much as we love Dawson Knox, his ceiling doesn't touch Austin Kincaid's, who could develop into a Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews type of player. His hands, body control, and route running, combined with athleticism and a 6'4" frame, makes him a matchup nightmare on the field. And while he's not an impact blocker, he's skilled enough to contribute to the run game. He is a complete offensive piece that will add to a very strong offense in Buffalo. This could be the beginning of a beautiful pairing with him and Josh Allen. Those are my biggest takeaways from the draft's first round. What are yours? Please like and subscribe and let us know in the comments section.